I think I would distinguish between environmentalism and conservation. I think I have a strong bent to conservation simply because it implies that as we live on the land, we can work on the land. Mm-hmm. We're not just putting it into parks and buying it up and then just walking away and saying it's saved. And I think that we've made some errors in trying to spend enormous amounts of public money on these set-asides, and that is to say that some of these aren't just very, very good things to have in the inventory for set-asides, but still there's been this kind of tension between environmentalism and conservation that you can't trust conservation because that implies somebody's going to use it, and boy, if somebody's going to use it, you just know they're going to do the wrong thing. So therefore, we better make it the hardcore environmentalism is it's a museum. Is once we get that key, it's going out the window, and we're not going to let anybody know where we tossed it.
So you talked to me previously a lot about the working landscape.
I did, and that's conservation.
You first fought off a dam that would have flooded Round Valley.
Everything.
Then the next thing is sort of a upper class subdivision
middle
type,
class,
middle class.
Cars and vehicles.
Of what's happening to the West today.
Oh, and it's just getting accelerated in California.
Right. Now, what you're left with then in Round Valley, the ranching, the timber operation, and what else? Tell me more about how the working landscape works out.
Well, we're at a very difficult time because the timber is gone, because fundamentally the big companies came in and Louisiana Pacific came in and overcut, and when we're through, they just left and left. That's all. They in essence went broke in California and walked out the door, leaving nothing really as a follow-up.
So that takes away one leg of the working landscape.
That takes away one leg, and then the other leg is the ranching, which has it's coming on hard times too because of just agriculture and the way agriculture is practiced, and where the small man doesn't really, fit very well anymore, and so that's not one of the big options. And so what you have is, from a working landscape, you have a growing Indian population. Whether they're going to take it up now and move it further ahead from their immediate needs of housing and whatnot, I don't know. And there are more and more people moving into Round Valley from the cities, buying lots where they want to have a place to live, out of the urban centers, which is what I wouldn't call working. It's a settlement type of a landscape.
A different type of my ranch, perhaps, or
not as intense. No, the density is. We're talking about 40-acre parcels, and so you're not getting the density of that. So you have a large area of ground that has a wilderness area, that has open ground, that has a slightly growing population, and my hunch is that the next whatever is going to change is still yet to come. Well, I guess one way of looking at it is the options are there for the future.
But you've also worked on sustainable timber growing.
Well, and again, it's exactly the same, more so I think now in the redwood country than it is.
Well, Mendocino County is a great case study.
It is indeed. It's a great case study.
What's happening there? I mean, I've read about the protests on Jackson State Forest and the Gap.
We've got two examples that I think stated eloquently. The Jackson State Forest. Here we are in 1945 when Earl Warren purchased that forest for $1 million, and it had been absolutely blitzed out. That had been burned and logged and donkeyed, and it just didn't have any more resiliency, and so they bought it. George Bigger, the state senator from Covelo, was one of the principals in that, and his state forester, and they bought it. They wanted to buy more, but they bought the 40,000 acres of the Jackson.
In Mendocino County.
It's in Mendocino County, and it lies more or less on an east-west axis between Fort Bragg and Willits. So you get both the coastal the redwood, the fog, and then as you move inland, you get more into the pine and fir country and some of the hardwoods. Well, the Jackson probably from 45 for 20, 25 years under the state was rested. In other words, that they maintained it. They allowed those redwood crowns to come back. They did a little bit of thinning and everything, to where then they began to get, you know, some pretty good results. They began to see, well, look, I mean, here we're starting to get some merchantable timber, and redwood has a really good price. And so they began to doing some harvesting. And so for the last, say, certainly 15 years or even a bit more, the Jackson forest is cutting less. Now, this is important because we use something called the percentage of inventory at 2% POI, meaning that's kind of, if you cut 2% of the volume, growing it, you're harvesting it, that's about an even split. Well, the Jackson isn't even doing that. It's cutting maybe a 1.3 or 1.4. So it's growing more wood than it is cutting. The net effect, it's been sort of a cash cow for the CDF and the state of about $15 million per year on 40,000 acres. Boy, would anybody love to have that today in a company and that kind of a resource.
So
there's the discipline.
It's economically viable.
Not only is it economically viable, it's a job producer. It also has a hatchery, it has a fishery, it has recreation, it has hiking and camping. I mean,
is it a model for the private forester?
It is indeed. It's a model, as well as the place that we should be doing more research. The hardline environmentalists, again, have been trying to stop everything and make it a park, and that to me is that's the wrong thing to do. I don't think you can get away from the land.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got technology and we've got stuff we can make more darn records and tables and everything, but you know, finally somebody has to take a hell of a shovel and dig a hole. I mean, that's the fact. The computers don't dig holes very well, right? I mean, you got to do it. And that's where the rubber meets the road. Somebody has to do it.
So that does seem to me to be a place where you really your point of view is shaped by the fact that you have dug the shovel.
Dug a lot of post holes. I did.
Would you say that's so?
Oh yeah, I've done a lot of that work. Yes, sir. And my and my dad was the same way. He was a doctor, but he did a lot of that. But he always told my mother that my two brothers were quite a bit older than I, and they were up at the ranch, and he was making them build fences the old way. And my mother'd say, "John," you know, she'd say, "We've got to get these boys to school." And he says, "Oh, the hell with school. They're learning more building a fence than they ever will in school."
Well, as I look over your career, it strikes me that you're really a very independent person. You're very rooted to the land. You drive that truck.
I drive the truck, yes, my truck.
And yet, because of your love of the land, you've been embroiled in politics and actually working within a political system very strongly throughout. Is there a tension there?
Yeah, there's a tension because I didn't start that, but I was pushed into it. You know, I mean, when the Corps of Engineers comes and tells you that we're going to save you because we're going to put 300 feet of water on your head, well, that's interesting. You know, I mean, that's a thought I've got to think through.
So you fought the Battle of Dos Rios.
Yeah, and then
you went on the Coastal Commission.
Well, and then I had Jeff Dennis right after that, and I've had the wilderness going on for 20 years, and on and on. You know, and I didn't go out into this to make a career out of it, but I just found myself just, as I said when we started, it's kind of my way or your way or the highway. I mean, it just these are interests in people that want to develop and they want to open up country, and a lot of good things have happened and a lot of bad things have happened, and as I say, you know, you find yourself right at loggerheads with them. It's like when I was messed up in Dos Rios, they'd say, "Well, young man, you don't know anything about this, and you really shouldn't be, you know, messing around." And I, you know, Yeah, I guess so. You're going to have to learn it fast, or these subdivision things, and learning how to print a newspaper and get the public organized. Yeah, you got to do that, and then some of these wilderness issues, and then the Coastal Commission, the Board of Forestry.
Right.
I mean,
well, you've had issues where you've fought campaigns, but then you've also had
right,
your involvement in the public process, the
right.
Coastal Commission, Board of Forestry, and Director, Department of Forestry.
But I will say, there's an important point there that you raised, and I'm glad you did, is that the work in the Coastal Commission, the work at the Board of Forestry, and my years as the director, were fundamentally regulatory.
Right.
In other words, you're a policeman. And regrettably, that does not enhance this idea of the working landscape, which is where you're trying to get this thing up and running where you don't have to be a policeman. That's the hard part.